All right, let's do this video. Lately, I've been diving deep in esoteric studies. What that means to me is I like to research into ancient civilizations, ancient language, ancient stories, and especially like origin stories, like creation stories really fascinate me. So in my life, I was raised in a Christian household, and so I grew up knowing and being told about the Garden of Eden, which is like, you know, the Christian creation story. Okay, so I want to try to separate like my angry teenager angst from my like wise woman self, because when I talk about Christianity, sometimes it brings up lots of anger for me. But just know that like I'm not telling this story to condemn anyone who's Christian or to you know, make anyone feel upset about their religious beliefs, because I think everyone, you know, has different spirits that they work with and different divine energy that they work with, and that's part of their personal, you know, experience and their spirituality. So I don't discredit anyone else's spirituality in that. But for me, growing up in a Christian home, I was, you know, it was kind of like spoon-fed to me. And so one of the things that was spoon-fed to me was the, you know, whole thought of the original sin from women, putting women in this place of being this, you know, villain. I disagree with this strongly. You know, I think it's interesting because I think so much of a creation story has really been twisted, and we have been hearing only one side of the story. And we've been hearing history, and her story has never been told because it's been burned, destroyed, and silenced for centuries, suppressed, squashed, belittled. So it is now coming into a time where communicating her story is so potent in what is happening in our current events. I firmly believe with all my heart that a wild woman, like this idea of like the wild femininity and this divine feminine aspect that we all have within ourselves. It doesn't matter if you're man or woman or somewhere in between, we all have this energy within us, and it's endangered. It's an endangered species in this world. But we are beginning to remember the forgotten mysteries of the goddess and realizing how stories of gods have paved into our patriarchal mindset that have, like, you know, enslaved us into a certain conditioning. I don't know about you, but I personally don't want to believe in any God that wants to enslave humankind, that wants to smite humankind, that wants humankind to go to hell. I have a really hard time with that particular God. That feels more satanic and demonic and evil to me than a God who wants people to feel enlightened and to hold wisdom. And so I feel like my connection to the divine is through this knowing of this inner wisdom. So this is where I get into looking into esoteric studies, because I stumbled across a Hindu story about the goddess Saraswati, and I'm probably not going to tell this story exactly right, but basically in the very beginning, all there was, chaos in the world. There was no world, it was just chaos. And whatever the divine energy of, in the Hindu tradition, it's Brahma, thought to itself, it doesn't have a gender, it's formless, it is the I am. How can I, being this divine will and divine power, create something, order, out of this disorder? And out of that thought, sprung out of the mouth of this idea on the back of a peacock, was the goddess Saraswati. Now, in Hindu custom, Saraswati is a Hindu goddess of wisdom, and she tends to be kind of like many people who are devotees to her are like students and scholars, musicians, artists, writers, people who want to acquire knowledge and intelligence about different things. And she offers the divine intuition for, this creativity in the world. So she offered that intuition from that idea of like, how can I create order out of disorder? She comes up and whispers into the ears of the Brahma the mysteries and the secrets of how to create the entire cosmos. And what I love about this story is that it is through the feminine aspect, not woman, but the feminine aspect of the intuition and of that innate wisdom that the entire, cosmos is created. So she's always been a huge influence into my life. Saraswati has been a huge influence in my life because not only am I a writer and an artist, but I'm a seeker of wisdom. I'm a seeker of knowledge. I want to know about the hidden mysteries. I want to know the truth. And unfortunately, I think the truth has been hidden from us for way too long. Way too long. So there's like this, so the stone ammonite is said to awaken past life rememberings, awaken the records, the Akashic records. It's interesting. I find it interesting that we as humans have no memory of where we came from. We have no memory. We've completely forgotten anything from, we technically are conscious beings from our birth, but we don't remember what it's like to be in the womb. We don't remember what it's like to be a child or be an infant. Oftentimes our first memories are like, maybe when we're 2 or 3 or 4 years old. Usually a lot of people remember like a traumatic thing that happened in their childhood, and that's like, their first memory, or, a really substantial moment in time. And so I just think it's so interesting how we have forgotten, and I don't think that's just a coincidence that we forget where we come from. And so kind of embeds this kind of like motivation to know where we come from. And that's why there's so many scientists and researchers who are studying human evolution, who are studying, paleontologists and all sorts of researchers that are like studying ancient civilizations, that are like literally trying to dig up the mysteries of where we came from the earth. And it is said that the foothill, or like the creation, the beginning, the Genesis began in ancient Sumeria. So this is like the birthplace of the written word, science, religion, war, and this is where, you know, where the Garden of Eden probably, you know, takes place. So there's been this like search in science to know where this garden, you know, comes from. And so we've been kind of told about, you know, Adam and Eve in the garden, and the apple and the serpent and all of these different elements, and how, you know, the serpent deceives Eve and she takes a bite of the forbidden fruit, which is the apple, and then they're condemned to leave from the garden. So that's the Garden of Eden story, right? I mean, there's much more complex themes than that, but what I find is so interesting is what kind of God would forbid knowledge, one, and what kind of God would banish its own creation out of quote unquote paradise. So this makes me feel like these kind of stories have been severely mistranslated, and mistold. And we've just been playing like this like human telephone game for centuries. But what researchers and scientists are discovering now is that the Sumerian Akkadian lexicon that they found, you know, so there's like Sumerian texts that are basically completely contradicting one another from the biblical text. And so I find that fascinating, that the actual Sumerian ancient text is completely different than what's written in the Holy Scriptures. So okay, I'll talk a little bit about Sumerian origin story a little bit, which kind of is, you know, it's different than the Garden of Eden, but then it's also has like similar elements. So in the beginning, according to Sumerian legend, when the gods arrived to Earth, they settled and created a colony on a mountain, which was like, it's like in modern day Turkey, I believe. And apparently there was some sort of like war or dysfunction out in the universe, and these gods, you know, came here to Earth as like a refuge from this, you know, cosmic battle that had been going on. I think it's a cosmic battle that's going on still. It's very much, you know, against matriarchal belief systems and patriarchal belief systems. So they settled and created a colony, and found shelter on this mountain. And apparently some scholars and scientists believe they came from the Pleiades star cluster, and there's like these different regimes of different types of gods and things like that. So they make Earth their home, and two of the main gods in Sumerian legends is Enki and Envil. And now Enki is kind of like a when you see him dressed, he's kind of like a god holding this like bag, and he's wearing this like fish suit, and he's typically known as like the god of wisdom, and he genuinely cares about his creation, which is humanity. And then there's Envil, which you see him typically in depictions of him holding like some sort of staff or weapon, and a dagger, and he's kind of this like feisty, angry, domineering, dangerous entity, and he does not really care about humanity. Actually, he wants to create humans so that they become slaves to his, you know, order, his regime. So he, you know, so they will build his world that he wants. So I mean, Envil's goal is to basically create workers of humans that serve the gods. I mean, he doesn't want to do the work. So why don't we just create, some slaves, and we build the planet that way? So apparently there's like, okay, so it's interesting because these are not the only gods. There's like a whole group of like kind of like intelligent beings that kind of have like this council, and they decide, how they're going to, create humankind, and what kind of like genes and genes that they want to use to create these, enlightened beings, or these, humans. And so I find this interesting. If you study human genetics, there's human chromosome 2. And what's interesting about human chromosome 2 is that there's a fusion of there's like a fusion in the chromosome where it's very similar to two other chromosomes from other primates. However, what sets us apart from the rest of the animal kingdom is that we have this, cortex, or this like logic, or compassion, sympathy, consciousness. And so basically you can break it down to that this fundamental humankind consciousness key is in chromosome number 2. And I'm thinking, like, what kind of intelligence would install this program onto us? And so I think that Enki, who cares about humankind, who wants us to have knowledge, who wants us to be free and to have free will, I would like to suggest that he was active in the genetics of, creating consciousness for, mankind, womankind. So I kind of see him as like this like master geneticist. And it's interesting because oftentimes, like, you would, in some of, he's kind of this like reptilian looking entity, and many humans have said that he's kind of like serpent-like. And so the story of the Garden, even serpent coming to visit Eve, the woman, is the story of Enki coming in the form of a serpent to the woman. Now, what does this represent? Like, the serpent is Kundalini energy, it's DNA energy. I mean, our DNA does this serpent-like crossing and weaving. And going back into Kundalini energy, I'm thinking he comes to the woman. The woman and the serpent have been our friends. They know each other well. They respect one another. The serpent is not evil. The serpent unlocks an inner knowing within the woman. And the reason why he comes to the woman is not because she's the weaker sex. I'm sorry. It's because, first of all, she's probably the one that's the most accessible because she collects the food for the village. And 2, she gives birth to the next generation. She's the teacher to the next generation. Of course, he wants to instill wisdom into the woman so that she can pass that wisdom in her legacy to her children. It makes total sense. She's not inferior. She's not subhuman. She's not below Adam. She is the essence of evolution in humankind. So this begins to start making humans much more independent from the gods, and that makes Envil really mad. And so this causes, like, from the beginning, there's been this duality on our planet, in our universe. And this is what sets the tone for all of the war, all of the battles, all of the struggles that we have in our society, in our world, in our realms today. And it's just like, find it really fascinating that there's this like conflict between Envil and Enki. But the funny thing is like the Hebrew story of Yahweh, this like God of Yahweh, who is like the biblical God, it's very similar to the Sumerian god Envil, which wants to suppress and enslave humanity. So the serpent who wants to open the minds of humankind is deemed to be evil. And the God who wants to control humankind becomes the Alpha and Omega, the only God that ever exists, that everyone believes in, and every society and king and kingdom have built their whole dogma off of this God who, I'm sorry, wants to enslave us, who doesn't care about us. So he forbids the tree of knowledge because he doesn't want us to be awake, doesn't want us to wake up from our eternal slumber as slaves. And so I think on earth there's so much of this like lessons of duality, and that's where we're kind of like in right now, is we're all like waking up finally to what has blindsided us for years out of religious dogma. So government, religions purposely have been mistranslating these ancient texts and sacred word, the Om, the vibration, the spelling of these stories. It's time to unblind ourselves. Because I don't think a good God would ever create imperfections or tragedy or a world that has, you know, so much pain and suffering and evil. And I personally think the biggest sin of all is ignorance. Ignorance is not bliss. That's not really bliss. So going back into the story of Saraswati, why she means so much to me is that she offers this divine remembering, this divine intuition, this divine wisdom spark in humanity. So she empowers us to find the words to create our world. And your words are so powerful, so powerful. That's why it's called spelling. You are literally casting spells with your words. So when you speak words with the intention, you manifest what you speak, because it is a sacred spelling that you're casting out. So if you desire to be blessed with the creative power, creativity, the activated throat chakra to communicate, you know, the essence of your being, then your truth will radiate out. So, we are remembering the forgotten mysteries of the goddess. My mission in life is to create a sacred container for which transformation of the new earth, of the wild woman, can take place through creative healing. We are unlocking those golden keys that open doorways and that ignite embers of our womb, heart, and soul that have been dormant for so long. And I know that we all desire a kinship to this essence of the divine feminine. So this is where the healing begins. The healing of our perception of what divine femininity really means. What does divine masculinity mean? And how can we balance and harmonize those aspects of ourselves together? And that's really what I want to explore, is a kinship with that. Anyways, hello, I'm Clara Moon. I'm a creative conduit, a wild woman, a goddess empowerment coach, and a rebirth doula. I was born in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, which I call my home, and my story begins in the creeks and the woods of Georgia, where I discovered my greatest calling in life is to be an artist, a writer, a healer, a wild child, and a free spirit of a bright and bold life. And over the years, my creative process, changes, and I'm exploring this beautiful creative process of video currently. I want my work to be deeply spiritual and invoke this transformative process to inspire, to empower, to heal all of you. This is creative alchemy that we are creating, and my aim is to channel and honor that divinity within and restore our connection with the sacred world around us, because we are celestial bodies. We are spiritual entities submersed in matter, spiritual beings, living in a physical existence right now. And there's so much more for us to unlock. Anyways, that's all for now. Ciao.